with more than 30 years of experience in helping individuals, families, and organizations to be more successful, now focuses on delivering tools for teaching better English for a better life. My dear friends, today I present to you Arthur Rubin.
I hope you guys can.
Arthur, can
Yeah.
you hear me? Yeah,
Pardon?
okay, we'll start.
Can you see me?
Arthur, I think your video is switched off.
Video?
Maybe you would like to.
Shouldn't be.
नाही नाही एक मोड सांगतो डिलिव्हरी ऑफ मोड ते आहे लिमिटेशन भरपूर आहे बरोबर
आपल्याकडे अजून एवढ्या ऍडव्हान्स नाही झाले स्कूलमध्ये चालू केले त्यांच्या स्कूलमधले फी कमी करायला तयार नाहीत
Well, how about if I switch over here?
4 महिने पडणार नाही
How about that?
आता हे यांनी 4 महिने आणखी स्कूल चालू होणार नाही ऑक्टोबर
Can you see me now?
पर्यंत पण यावर्षी सरकारने
Am I live yet?
Yes, you are audible. We can hear you.
But I'm not video. Hello. Okay. All right. Before I get started, I need to thank my son Ian and my daughter Adina for putting up with me and my advice giving for all these years. I'm honored by them as they show me the ways they have integrated my thoughts with their own to make a better set of tools and ideas. Thank you, Ian, and thank you, Adina. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our world, where there often, not always, is no way to predict what's going to happen next, where all too often we live in a fog of uncertainty and confusion, where the right thing to do is a mystery, where we struggle to find our balance and lower our anxiety. If any of this sounds familiar, you're in good company. At one time or another, almost everyone has these experiences, and for some, it is a permanent way they live. How about you? I lived these very problems for many years. I struggled to be comfortable in my life. I looked and looked for tools, some way to feel better and to feel in control of my life. Eventually, I found help. I now know more and do more, and I am less anxious because I follow what I call Rule 1. Next slide. The rule is do the right thing, do it right the first time, every time. We can't always do that, but we certainly can improve and do it more often. This is really an important concept because when it's done right, it's done. There's no fixing, no blaming, no taking corrective action, no waste of time or mental energy or physical energy. I hope that I'm about to share some information that will help each of you do the right thing right the first time, every time, more often as you go through life, because then you'll have a better life. Rubin truth number 1. Life really is complicated, complex, and chaotic. Next slide. The corollary to that, complexity and chaos go hand in hand. They're two sides of the same coin. If you're overwhelmed by complexity and chaos, It's not your fault. There's nothing wrong with you. It's perfectly reasonable to be in that condition. Here's why. Next slide. Here's what I call a Rubin rule. Complexity increases by the power of the number of variables. If you look at this, oh my goodness, they're out of order. Okay, so go over to the middle one where you can see it easily. Now on the left, you'll see there's listed number 1 through 10. And in the middle, it shows you, oh, where's the rest of my slide? Okay. No, go back. Can you see the right-hand side of the slide? Yeah. Okay. Anyway, if you look to the right-hand side of this slide, you'll see it starts out very simply. You'll have the 1 to the power of 1. But it goes up, becomes very complex very fast. In fact, by the time you have 10 variables, you're at 10 billion possibilities. Think about that for a minute. That makes life very complex because I doubt whether any of us has only 10 things to deal with in the course of a day. So think about that. How many variables do you have in an average day? Is your life a little complex, moderately complex, or extremely complex? And because life is so complex, it's always chaotic. Lots of things going on to make it hard to see the rational reason or to understand what's going on. We can't make sense of life a lot of the time, and that is chaos. I bet your life is very complicated. How can you make it uncomplicated? I'll tell you what not to do. Do not force any changes. This is really important because if you try to force it or to make it happen, it would be foolhardy. Unless you have some tools that will help you do it. For example, do you understand that within chaos and complexity, you still have the ability to affect some things, and there are things that you cannot. If you try to change or affect things that you cannot change, it won't work well. So it's important to know the difference. Next slide. You can learn to know the difference and to let go of the things you cannot affect when you know the difference. When you do, life will be much more satisfying and you will have much less stress. For example, here's some things that might help you. Some of you may have heard of the Serenity Prayer. It was written originally by an American theologian named Reinhold Niebuhr. He wrote, "Father, give us courage to change what must be altered, serenity to accept what cannot be helped, and the insight to know the one from the other." Years later, the prayer was picked up by a program called 12-Step Programs, and I suppose some of you have heard about that. And it's designed to help people deal with disease. The words were changed slightly to read like this: God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. When used effectively, this is a very powerful statement. Now, some of you may already know the prayer, or a prayer or poem in your own culture or religion that has the same or very similar message. So let me go on further. How do you, in fact, get the wisdom to know the difference? Whenever you need to know the difference, just ask yourself this: what can I do right now about this thing, whatever it is? Now, the exact phrase may be different, but it must always be about doing something right now. And when you ask that question, you will either know what to do or you won't. So if you do know what it is, if it's clear to you suddenly, oh, I can do this, then do it. And if not, don't do anything. And if you don't do anything, then you can plan to come back later if you want, to consider again whether at some later time you can do something, or you can decide to put this out of your mind and forget about it. Now, before you get the idea that you have everything you need, that you're ready to go forth and deal with life, just hold on for a minute. Here's an important question. How well can you do what I have shared already? Consider truth two. A, knowing is not doing, and B, doing it competently makes life less complex and less chaotic. Next slide. So what we're talking about, hello, next slide. Here we go. So we're talking about competence, and competence is a continuum. As you see on this pyramid, at the bottom, it says that you are unconscious and incompetent. You want to become competent without having to think, and you want to have good intuition. So how to achieve this level of competence that allows you to do things without thinking about them? Think about this Serenity Prayer. Most of you have never used it, so you're not going to be very good at it. You're not going to be competent at all. And you couldn't have done something earlier because you didn't know about it. So to begin with, before we started this conversation, you were unconscious about the Serenity Prayer, and you were incompetent because you had no way to practice. Now you've become aware of it. You've become conscious that there is a Serenity Prayer, but you haven't done anything with it. You're at stage 2. You're conscious of it, but you're not competent. So conscious and incompetent. At stage 3, you arrive at a point where you're both conscious and competent. That is to say, you have to think about using the Serenity Prayer and think about each step in using it. And as you do that, eventually, if you continue and persist, you will become more and more competent. And at some point, you'll find that you're using it, but you haven't had to really think about using it. When you get there, you have such a level of competence that you no longer are conscious of what you're doing. The top of the pyramid, unconscious competence. Another example is, suppose you're trying to learn how to drive a scooter or a motorbike. Again, early on in your life, you really didn't know anything about it. You weren't interested in it. You didn't care. It was out of your mind. and you were unconscious, and because of that, you were incompetent. Somewhere along the line, you grew up enough that you became aware of a motorbike or scooter and the idea of driving it. And when you got a little older, you actually started trying to find ways to get your own scooter, learn how to drive it. And so you were paying attention to other people doing it. Perhaps you rode on the back and you could see how things were done. Later, you actually had the opportunity to begin to actually try to drive one of the machines. And perhaps the first time you did it, you fell over. I'm sure that didn't happen to you, but for a lot of people it did. Eventually, you actually got the scooter or motorbike to move forward. You could release the brake and give it some gas, and you'd stay upright and move on down the road. And when you practiced that long enough, you would find yourself driving the motorbike. And eventually, when you got doing it, when you've done it long enough, you definitely become competent and able to drive your motorbike without having to think about it at all. And you can go from point A to point B and not really know how you managed to drive there. So that's another very useful thought. If you follow the pyramid, you will become much better at doing many, many things. There's one more tool. Many of my clients have reported that this tool is the most powerful they have ever found. It has empowered them more than anything else. At some point in your life, you're likely to find a problem that does not respond to all the tools that you try to use. You work on it, but it does not go away. It's still there. It's one that you can't fix. So this situation happens to me. And when it happens, I find that I want to know why. Why haven't I fixed this? Why can't I do it? And that's when I pull this one tool out of my toolbox. So let me talk about this. If you will actively join me and practice this, actually do this as I talk about it. Think of one thing in your life that you're not satisfied with, the thing that you would perhaps like to have be better. Preferably one that you have tried to resolve and failed. Write it down in one short phrase or sentence. Something that bothered you repeatedly and you haven't been able to resolve. Okay, go ahead and write it down. Instead of trying to use one of the tools above, I'm going to presume that you already have tried it. And now I want you to do this. I want you to answer these 3 questions. Regarding this particular problem, are you ready to resolve it? That's a yes or no. Are you willing? And are you able? To be ready, you have to want to make the change, and it has to be a matter of priority to you. To determine if you're willing, you must be able to say that you're motivated to change. And there's significant importance to the change and to making something be different. And finally, to be able, you have to have the skills to make the change and the confidence to try to make the change. So it may well be that you are trying to change something that you cannot change. Think about that for a moment. Not everything that bothers you or that you want to change can be changed by you. So again, do it if you can. If your answer is yes to all those questions, then you do have an opportunity to try to make a change, or you have to let it go because you don't have the proper combination of willingness, readiness, and ability. Okay, this is going much faster than I expected. There's another way you can approach things. If you call what you're trying to do a goal, you can analyze your goal to ensure it's the right goal at the right time for creating some possible shift for you. Like ready, willing, and able, it's important to optimize your time, your physical energy, and your mental energy to do the right tasks. So not only do you have to do it right the first time, every time, but it's really important that you pick the right task. The Serenity Prayer is one way to do that. Asking yourself if you're ready, willing, and able is another. But there's still one more. Understand that some things are known and other things are not. So if you have a clear understanding of what it is that you know is to be true, because you've tested and researched and thought through logically. And the second part of it is that there are known unknowns. That is to say, you can be aware that there are things you don't know. And it's important to recognize those too and to document them. But the thing that stops us is we don't consider the unknowns that are present that we don't know about. Think about that for a moment. There are things that you don't know that you can't know. So these are the unknown unknowns, or the things that are going to happen later that are going to surprise you, that you didn't consider, that just pop up, and what are you going to do about it? Because you weren't prepared for them, per se. You can help yourself by planning for the unexpected. All right? So that's a good way to approach things also. It will help you avoid starting down a path to try and do something and avoid being caught so unexpectedly by something that you didn't know about, that it completely throws you off track. So make sure you understand the knowns and that you are clear that of what is the known unknowns, the questions you still have to answer, and keep in mind and plan for some way to deal with the things that you can't know until they occur, or at least further down in your process. So those are some of the things that I can offer you. There is one more if we have time, and it's the issue of control. We focused on coping with complexity and chaos so far, but I want to provide a little guidance and warning about a major mistake many people get caught in. We're human, and because we're human, we experience being uncomfortable. Now, when that happens, you can easily react with anger or become ready to fight. The greater our discomfort, the greater our reaction is to try to control. Our fight or flight mechanism kicks in, and fight is very strong and we tend to focus on it. But be careful. If you choose to fight, you can be in a trap. It can trap you both physically and mentally. It can become exhausting. It causes you stress. It causes anxiety. And worse, all too often, it's an illusion. You just don't have the power to control some of the things that you want to control so badly that you have difficulty letting them go. So before you fight, make sure you use your tools to examine the situation carefully. You've got those tools I've offered you, and you may have more that you know, so that you increase the chances of success. Good decisions can make your life better. Poor decisions can ruin your life. My advice is for you to make decisions in each case consciously. Make sure you are deciding what to do or not do. Otherwise, you're going to have feelings that are not accurate, and you're going to make decisions that are not within your power to control. And as you get older, you're going to find out that you feel that you have been pushed around by other people, and that you are feeling enough that when it gets strong enough, you're going to be feeling like you're a victim. And I don't think any of us want to do that. So be sure you're making decisions ultimately for yourself. Don't let other people make those decisions for you. And finally, I want you to remember this. You already have everything you need to have a better life. You need to be in touch with all of it. You need to understand and believe and accept that this is true. You have everything you need to have a better life, because you're the key element in this. Now, many of you may already have this kind of understanding of life. Maybe you have learned to let go. If so, I think that you're going to find it works better than having to struggle with and try to change things. So, final thoughts? I don't know which of the many ideas I presented will be of help to each of you. I hope some will. Here are 4 things that I'd like to share with you. 1, somewhere along the way, you will almost certainly find that letting go is an important skill. And there are lots of ways to do that. You can read, you can join groups, etc., to learn how to let go. Forgiving yourself is number 2. That's an important one. It's important to recognize that you did do the best you knew how at the time you made a choice or decision. So looking backward and trying to worry out how you could have done such a thing or why you did this or that back then doesn't help you a lot. And you will get a lot of relief if you understand that when you made that decision, you were doing the very best you could. Number 3, nothing I or anyone else says is worth anything unless it supports you on your journey. Ignore it, except when it meets your needs. 4, don't sweat the small stuff. By the way, it's all small stuff. 5, only attend to that which you can do something about right now. The rest may be revisited later to see if it's something that you can do then, or put aside, ignore, or forget. 6, winning. What does that mean? Clearly define what winning will look like, feel like, be for you. You need to know where you're going, or you may well arrive somewhere else. 7, knowing who you will be, want to become, is also where you are going, and may be more important than what happened in the past. So 8, answer the question, what are you committed to? 9, what life's rules are the ones that you live by, want to live by, choose, yes, divine, until you feel that they are right. Some people are toxic for you. This is number 10. Avoid them whenever possible. They may be perfectly good human beings and still be toxic for you. And finally, choose goals that are small enough to achieve and big enough to matter. That's all I have for them. I'm ready to move forward with questions. So, anybody home?
Yes, Arthur.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. And the floor is now open to questions. So may I request all the participants, please, you can type your questions in the chat box, and as the moderator, I will pass on your questions to Arthur.
I just never know how well I translated my messages, or how well people are able to use them.
I think it was pretty well, and I learned a lot from it.
Thank you.
We have a question here from Pooja. Just a second, it's going too fast. Okay, now life.
Hello. Hello.
Yeah. Saying that very good, wonderful message. Same.
I'm not hearing you.
Sorry, are you hearing me?
No, I'm hearing you, but I can't understand what it is. It's broken up.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello, sir. This is Sashikla here. I have a question. Sometimes we used to make a decision which are not wise to make. Can we change it, or how to accept the decision what we made?
I think if you apply some of the concepts that I've taught, I think that trying to determine if you are ready, willing, and able to change that particular thing, and carefully consider whether or not You really are. Don't do it lightly. Really consider, am I ready? And if so, in what way? Am I willing? And the sense of willingness is either there or it's not. Am I able? And able includes that you have the ability to deal with whatever is already in place and the effects that you're going to create when you try to change something. Good old Einstein did tell us that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So anything you're going to do is going to create some kind of reaction. And you have to know whether or not you're willing to face that, and if you feel you have the necessary ability to deal with it. I hope that helps.
Yes.
Next.
Yes, sir. One other question is there. Someone has asked how the attachment with our family is stopping us from reaching our goal. How can we overcome that?
That's one of the tougher ones. Of course, we're attached to a family. Yeah, I think as you grow older, you work on that. That may be a competency issue, combined with ready, willing, and able. It's something that one has to make sense of over time. You have to consider what's going to happen if you do what you'd like to do. What's the effect on your family? And are you willing to take that risk and see what happens? It also can be seen as an experiment. In an experiment, you you want to test something and you want to see what happens. So you set your hypothesis about how your family might react if you do X or Y. And then you have to stay logical and continue as if it's an experiment, so that you're not forcing the issue and you're prepared to accept whatever happens as the reality and decide what to do next after you get the result. Okay, I hope that one helped.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
There is one more question from Lalita, and she is asking that how are self-motivation and self-control related?
Say that again.
How are self-motivation and self-control related?
Oh, I think again, it's two sides of a coin. Self-motivation is the sense from inside that you want to, or you feel that you need to do something, and then the self-motivation and the other half of it, Mom Kika?
Self-control.
Self-control. Oh, okay. So self-control is about two things. Part of it is rational and part of it is emotional. Self-control is something you absolutely have to be logical about. You have to think about, and you have to be able to be in touch with your emotional content. The Serenity Prayer sometimes can help with that. My experience has been that when I ask the question of what can I do about this right now, or perhaps what should I do about this right now, or how can I best respond to this feeling right now, I feel it right in the pit of my stomach. So it's an emotional response to the question I'm asking, and I can feel it if I'm relaxed enough and not trying to make something happen. But self-control often is a choice. And you'll end up struggling with it until you learn how to do it well. And it'll fall into the category of going from unconscious competence to conscious incompetence. And you'll work your way through that by practicing and paying attention to it. There you go.
Yeah,
Best I can
great.
do.
Thank you. One more question from Diksha Kadam. And she says that how can we balance religion and science together? Can we be just scientific in our approach?
Well, of course not. That won't work. The fact of the matter is that all of us have the ability to be logical and scientific if we decide to do that. There are people who manage life by doing it through the sense of religion and what religion offers them. So again, everything, including this, there is both choice and some kind of emotional content. I think both that religion and science can work very well together. They do for me. I'm not very religious, but I have not in my life been able to figure out whether or not, for example, there is a God, or there are multiple gods perhaps. And is God a man or a woman, or perhaps some other kind of being that we don't currently understand? That said, it's always a matter of how does this help you? Again, it's all about making sure that you're making good choices for you. So how does this help you with whatever it is you're dealing with? And then keep in mind that there are things that we can discuss all as much as we want, but they are theoretical. And then we have things that we must deal with because they're going to hurt us or make some change that we may not like. And those become the things we have to deal with logically and perhaps more scientifically. Okay?
Absolutely. Thank you, Arthur. The next question is from Zahur Ahmed, and he wants to know that what should be coping strategy for teachers when they teach emotionally imbalanced students?
There's the challenge. First of all, it's not clear exactly what's going on with that student. So it's hard for me to be sure quite what to say to you. If a student is emotionally unbalanced, is there a school counselor that can help to clarify what's going on? Emotionally unbalanced student could be anything from someone who is experiencing trauma at home or on the street or just in their own head. So clarifying is the key to that one. If you have some sense of why this person is overreacting to situations, then you may be able to help them by first accepting them and accepting that they are dealing with whatever it is that's real for them. And if you do that, then you're into some kind of, quote, counseling role, the way a psychologist or psychiatrist might do it. You're letting them know that you're interested in them, you believe what they say, and if you establish a relationship on that basis, and they become comfortable with you, then you may be able to help them. But if you're just going to try to teach them without that, or if you can't do that, then there's very little you can do to actually succeed. It's a challenge. Okay?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. One more question. How to understand the attitude of others by Sophia.
Well, again, you have to accept first that whatever their attitude is, it's their attitude. And there's some reason why they have that attitude, and you can't know anything about that because they come from a whole different set of experiences. So the difficult part is simply letting it be true that that is their attitude and it has value to them. And therefore you can approach them with that sense of understanding and not challenge them per se, but you can get into a conversation and indicate your perspective once you become comfortable and they become comfortable in simply talking to each other with acceptance of your each being different. Did that help?
Yes, definitely. Okay, we have a lot of questions here, but I think we can take two more questions.
Okay.
Right. So I will take this question from Swar Patel, and a very simple but important question. Is it okay to just go with the flow?
Wow.
Sometimes, like anything else, if you have one tool and that's what you use all the time for everything, it's not going to work out. You know, you cannot drive a screw properly with a hammer, and you cannot drive a nail with a screwdriver. So you have to use the right tool at the right time. And so the question is, what's the right tool for the situation you're trying to deal with at this time, right now? Right now really is one of the biggest things for me, because I've learned that if I can put things in terms of right now, it changes my understanding or comprehension. And often the answer is very clear because I can feel it in my gut. That's my answer.
Great. Thank you. And one more question, which is, I think, important for me also. How to remain calm when a student purposely, tries to provoke you?
Ah. I think, trying to remember the ways in which I coped with people who are angry at me. I think, first of all, it's not about you. Whatever's going on with a student who's trying to provoke you, it probably has nothing to do with you per se. It has to do with what's going on in their life and in their head. And it could be almost anything. They had a fight with their mother, their husband, their father, their wife, their brother, sister. Something in their life is out of kilter. And they're upset. And they're focusing that upset on you. But I guess that's the right answer. It's not about you. It's about them and their experience before they got face to face with you. And that should help you to step back and not react to the anger or frustration or whatever it is the student's saying that might get you upset. I hope that works for you. And again, you may have to practice it in order to become good at it. I'm done with that one. I hope that helped too.
Definitely. Uh, Thank you so much, Arthur. I, Ankita Khanna, on behalf of PP Savani University and BDMA, would like to express my heartfelt thanks to you for joining us today and sparing out your valuable time for us. I know it's early morning for you there, and still you are here for us for this session. Thank you so much. And also a lot of thanks to the participants for their wonderful participation and very interesting questions. Thank you so much.
Well, I am
So
very
I think with this,
it certainly is my pleasure, and I appreciate all of the students who came to this presentation. I'm pleased to be able to share some of the things I know, and I can only hope that you find them useful.
thank you everyone, and we'll end the session today here. And please don't worry about your attendance. I've been reading a lot of messages for that. So please, you can write us on the email address with some screenshot or something, and we'll consider that. Okay. Thank you everyone. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.